I'm Ken Thompson, 67 years old, and last spring I withdrew $18 million cash for my dream house. I hid it in my daughter Amanda's antique chest temporarily. The next morning, she was gone, along with every dollar. Her note read, "Thanks, Dad. I can live my dream now." My friends thought I'd lost everything, but I couldn't help laughing at what she'd actually taken. Where are you watching from today? Let me know in the comments. Hit that subscribe button, and I'll tell you why that money bag only contained. The $18 million that Amanda thought she'd stolen represented a lifetime of hard work. 45 years of building a commercial real estate empire from absolutely nothing. Many people see the successful businessman today and assume I was born with a silver spoon in my mouth. But nothing could be further from the truth. I grew up in a tiny, dilapidated house in rural Pennsylvania. My father worked at the steel mill when he wasn't drinking himself into oblivion, which wasn't often. Most nights, I'd find him passed out on our threadbare couch, empty bottles scattered around him like fallen soldiers. My mother worked 2 jobs just to keep food on the table. She cleaned houses during the day and waited tables at night. I barely saw her, but her work ethic became my blueprint for life. By 16, I was working after school at a local construction company, learning every aspect of the building trade. I saved every penny for college, determined to break the cycle of poverty. When I finally got accepted to Penn State, it felt like winning the lottery. That's where I met Margaret, the love of my life. Margaret was studying architecture when I quite literally bumped into her at the library. I spilled coffee all over her blueprints for a class project. Instead of getting angry, she looked at my clumsy attempts to clean up the mess and laughed. "You've just created a coffee-stained masterpiece," she said. "The professor will think I'm revolutionary." We were married 2 years after graduation. Margaret joined a prestigious architectural firm while I started a small construction business, renovating houses in up-and-coming neighborhoods. We complemented each other perfectly, her vision and my practical skills. Within 10 years, we had expanded into commercial real estate development. For our honeymoon, we had scraped together enough money to spend 3 days in a tiny rental cottage on the coast of Maine. The place was hardly luxurious. It had a leaky roof and questionable plumbing, but sitting on that rocky beach, watching the Atlantic waves crash against the shore, Margaret turned to me and said, "Someday, we'll build our own house right here, with huge windows to watch the storms roll in." That became our shared dream. Every anniversary, we would return to Maine, walking the coastline, imagining where our future home would stand. 20 years into our marriage, when the business had become successful enough, we finally purchased a 10-acre oceanfront property. Margaret spent countless evenings sketching designs, collaborating with Thomas Reed, an architect friend who had made a name designing sustainable luxury homes. The plans were magnificent. A 4-bedroom main house with floor-to-ceiling windows facing the ocean, a private beach access path, a boat dock for the sailing hobby I'd taken up in my 50s. Margaret had designed an art gallery wing where she could display her growing collection of local artists' work. There was even an observatory tower where we could stargaze on clear nights, something we both loved to do. Despite our growing wealth, Margaret and I maintained relatively modest lifestyles compared to our means. The 2008 financial crisis had hit many of our friends hard, and I'd seen too many fortunes evaporate overnight. I developed a healthy distrust of banks and financial institutions, preferring tangible assets and, yes, sometimes cash. We lived in the same house we'd bought 30 years ago, drove practical cars, and invested our money carefully. Then, 3 years ago, Margaret was diagnosed with aggressive pancreatic cancer. Within 6 months, she was gone. On one of our final days together, as I sat holding her hand in the hospital room, she made me promise something. "Build the house, Ken," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Build it for both of us. And when it's done, take some of my ashes there. I want to watch those sunrises we always talked about." I nodded, unable to speak through my tears. It was a promise I intended to keep, no matter what. Little did I know that my own daughter would nearly destroy that dream. Amanda was our only child, born 5 years into our marriage. From the beginning, she was the center of our world. Bright, beautiful, and blessed with her mother's artistic eye and my determination. At least, That's what we thought during her early years. We provided Amanda with every advantage: private schools, music lessons, summer camps, international travel. Margaret and I had both grown up with so little that perhaps we overcorrected with our daughter. By her teenage years, troubling signs of entitlement began to emerge. "You don't understand what it's like to be me," became her constant refrain whenever we attempted to establish boundaries. While her friends worked summer jobs, Amanda insisted she needed to focus on building her portfolio for college applications. The portfolio somehow never materialized, but her requests for spending money never ceased. Still, her academic abilities were undeniable. She was accepted to Princeton, her mother's alma mater, with a partial scholarship. Margaret and I were ecstatic, certain this would be the beginning of Amanda finding her path. We drove her to campus, helped set up her dorm room, and left feeling hopeful about her future. 3 months later, we received a call from the dean of students. Amanda had stopped attending classes and was on academic probation. When confronted, she claimed she found the business program soul-crushing and wanted to transfer to a school with a better arts program. We reluctantly agreed. The pattern repeated at Rhode Island School of Design, then again at NYU. By 23, Amanda had attended 3 prestigious universities without completing a single degree. Each time, the story changed. The professors didn't understand her vision. The program wasn't challenging enough. She'd discovered a new passion. Margaret always defended her. "She's finding herself," she would say. "Remember how lost you felt at that age." But I recognized something deeper and more troubling: a lack of commitment and an inability to face challenges. Whenever things became difficult, Amanda simply moved on to the next shiny opportunity. Her career attempts followed the same trajectory. She spent 6 months as a photography assistant before deciding she wanted to design clothes. Her fashion line launched with a $5,000 investment from us, then folded when she lost interest in production logistics. She managed a friend's restaurant until the first health inspection, then quit because it was too stressful. Throughout her 20s, Amanda's personal life mirrored her professional instability. She had a talent for finding partners who reinforced her worst tendencies. There was Jackson, the music producer who borrowed $12,000 for studio equipment, then disappeared. Sophia, the business manager, who convinced Amanda to invest in a pop-up shop that never opened. And Tyler, perhaps the worst, who moved into Amanda's apartment and lived off her for 2 years while supposedly writing a screenplay. Every crisis ended with a tearful phone call and a request for money. Margaret and I disagreed fundamentally on how to handle these situations. I advocated for tough love, setting clear boundaries and allowing Amanda to experience consequences. Margaret couldn't bear to see her daughter struggle. "She just needs more time to mature," Margaret would insist after writing another check. "Not everyone finds their way on the same timeline. She's never going to find her way if we keep cushioning every fall," I would counter, leading to tension between us, the only serious conflict in our otherwise harmonious marriage. After one particularly expensive disaster involving Amanda's short-lived interior design consultation business, I put my foot down. "No more bailouts," I told Margaret. "We're not helping her by enabling this behavior." Amanda didn't speak to me for 6 months after that. She would call when she knew I was at work, talking only to her mother. The rift between us grew deeper, with Margaret reluctantly playing mediator. When Margaret got sick, Amanda initially seemed to step up. She visited regularly during the first months of treatment, even helped organize medications and appointments. I began to hope that the seriousness of the situation had finally sparked a change in her. But as Margaret's condition deteriorated, Amanda's visits became less frequent. She always had excuses: work commitments, her apartment's plumbing emergency, a friend's emotional crisis. On the day Margaret died, I called Amanda repeatedly. She didn't answer until the following morning, claiming her phone had been on silent. She arrived for the funeral in a black dress. I later discovered she'd charged to my credit card, gave a moving eulogy about her mother's unfailing support, then left the reception early for a work obligation I later learned was a date. For the year after Margaret's death, Amanda and I barely communicated. I was drowning in grief, trying to adjust to life without my partner of 40 years. Meanwhile, Amanda posted regular updates on social media about her healing journey and new spirituality phase, complete with expensive retreats in Sedona. Then, about 6 months ago, she reached out unexpectedly. She showed up at my door with coffee and pastries, looking more put together than I'd seen her in years. She apologized for her absence during my grieving process and expressed a desire to rebuild our relationship. "Mom would want us to be there for each other," she said, tears in her eyes. "I've been doing a lot of thinking about my life choices, Dad. I want to make changes." Against my better judgment, I felt a surge of hope. Could my daughter finally be maturing? She mentioned she'd been studying interior design online and asked about the dream house plans. For the first time in years, we had a conversation that didn't end in an argument or a request for money. Over the next few months, Amanda became increasingly interested in the house project. She asked to see the architectural plans, suggested thoughtful modifications to the interior layouts, and even created digital mood boards for each room. I began to believe that working on Margaret's dream house together might be healing for both of us. If only I'd recognized her sudden interest for what it really was. A calculated move in her most ambitious con yet. The construction of the main house was scheduled to begin in early spring. After interviewing several contractors, I settled on Coastal Heritage Builders, a company with an impeccable reputation for high-end custom homes. Their portfolio included several oceanfront properties that had been featured in architectural magazines, and they came highly recommended by Thomas Reed, the architect who had finalized Margaret's designs after her death. During my final meeting with James Harrington, the company's founder, he presented me with an unusual proposition. If I could pay the entire construction cost up front in cash, he would reduce the total price by 7%, saving me nearly $1.4 million. "We're a small operation compared to some builders," Harrington explained. "But that works in your favor. No corporate overhead, no financing costs passed on to you. Cash flow is always the biggest challenge in our business, especially for a project of this scale that will take 18 months to complete. Having the full funding secured from day one means I can commit to your project exclusively and negotiate better prices with suppliers." The request wasn't entirely surprising in the construction industry, where cash discounts are common, though usually not at this scale. Still, I did my due diligence. I researched Harrington's company thoroughly, checked references from previous clients, verified his contractor's license and insurance, and even had my lawyer review the detailed construction contract. Everything checked out. Coastal Heritage had been in business for 22 years without a single lawsuit or BBB complaint. Their completed projects were stunning, and previous clients raved about their craftsmanship and integrity. The contract included detailed materials, specifications, construction milestones, and a reasonable payment schedule if I chose the traditional route. After considering the significant savings and my long-standing preference for tangible assets over bank holdings, I decided to accept Harrington's cash offer. The $18 million would come from a combination of liquid investments I'd been holding specifically for this project. Arranging such a large cash withdrawal required careful planning. I contacted Somerset Trust, where I'd been a premier client for over 30 years, and scheduled a meeting with Walter Griffith, the bank manager. Walter and I had a long professional relationship, but even he was taken aback by my request. "Ken, I must strongly advise against withdrawing this amount in cash," he said, looking genuinely concerned. "The risks are substantial: theft, loss, damage. We have several secure wire transfer options that would be far safer." I explained my reasons, including the considerable savings. Walter continued to express reservations, but acknowledged it was ultimately my decision. He explained they would need at least 5 business days to prepare for such an unusual withdrawal, as they'd have to order additional cash from the Federal Reserve. "You'll need to sign several liability waivers," he added. "Once the money leaves our premises, the bank cannot be responsible for what happens to it." The day of the withdrawal, I arrived at the bank early. Walter had arranged for me to use a private conference room in the back of the building. For 2 hours, I signed documents absolving the bank of all responsibility while bank employees counted out $18 million in various denominations, mostly $100 bills, with some 50s and 20s to reduce the physical volume. Few people realize just how much space $18 million in cash actually occupies. Even in $100 bills, we're talking about 180,000 individual notes. The money filled 8 reinforced security cases, each weighing approximately 40 pounds. Moving that much cash required serious logistical planning. I had hired Sentinel Security, a private firm specializing in high-value transports, to escort me home. 2 armed guards helped load the cases into an unmarked armored vehicle, while 2 more followed in a separate car as additional security. Amanda was surprisingly home when we arrived. She typically spent evenings out with friends or at her apartment in the city, but she'd been staying at my house more frequently since our reconciliation. She watched with wide eyes as the security team carried the heavy cases into my study. "Dad, what's going on?" she asked, genuine astonishment in her voice. "Just some paperwork and materials for the main project," I replied casually, thanking the security team as they departed. My home already had an excellent security system, motion sensors, cameras covering every entrance, and direct connection to the local police station. After Margaret's death, I'd upgraded everything, partly out of caution living alone and partly to protect her art collection, which had appreciated significantly over the years. Once alone, I faced the question of where to secure the money overnight. I planned to meet Harrington the next morning to finalize everything, but needed a safe place for the cash until then. In retrospect, choosing Amanda's antique chest was both sentimental and foolish. The chest had belonged to Margaret's grandmother, a beautiful hand-carved maple piece with intricate floral inlays. Margaret had used it to store family heirlooms and important documents. After her death, I'd given it to Amanda as a keepsake, and she'd placed it at the foot of her bed in her childhood room, which she now used when staying over. The chest had a decent lock, and more importantly, was in a room covered by security cameras. I reasoned that no one would think to look for such a sum there, and it would only be for one night. I carefully transferred the money from the security cases to the chest after Amanda had gone out to meet a friend for dinner. When she returned, I was in the kitchen preparing a late meal. She seemed in unusually high spirits, chatting animatedly about her ideas for the house's interior color palette. She'd even brought paint samples and fabric swatches to show me. "I'm thinking coastal blues and soft grays for the main living areas," she explained, spreading the samples across the kitchen island, with natural wood accents to warm everything up. Her selections were tasteful and remarkably similar to what Margaret had envisioned. For the first time in years, I felt a genuine connection with my daughter. We stayed up late, discussing the house, reminiscing about Margaret, even sharing a bottle of wine, something we'd never done before. At one point, I noticed Amanda glance toward the hallway leading to the bedrooms, a flicker of something unreadable crossing her face. A momentary suspicion flashed through my mind. Had she seen me with the money earlier? But I dismissed it as paranoia. This was my daughter, and despite our difficult history, she was finally showing interest in something meaningful to both of us. "Your mother would be so happy to see us working on this together," I told her as we said goodnight. She hugged me tightly, something she hadn't done voluntarily since she was a teenager. "I love you, Dad," she said. "Thanks for giving me another chance." I went to bed that night feeling more hopeful about our relationship than I had in decades. By morning, everything would change. I woke early the next day, energized by anticipation. The meeting with Harrington was scheduled for 10 o'clock, and I wanted to get an early start on the 2-hour drive to the building site in Maine. I made coffee and glanced at the weather app on my phone. Clear skies predicted, perfect for viewing the property. Something felt off about the house, a stillness that went beyond the normal morning quiet. Amanda was never an early riser, but I usually heard some signs of life. Water running in the bathroom, music playing softly behind her closed door. Today there was nothing. I walked down the hallway and noticed her bedroom door was partially open, unusual for someone who had always been protective of her privacy. I knocked gently. "Amanda, coffee's ready." No response. I pushed the door open wider and felt a cold knot form in my stomach. The bed was made, another anomaly, and the room had an emptiness to it that went beyond mere absence. Her toiletries were gone from the dresser. The framed photo of her with Margaret that always stood beside her bed had disappeared. The closet door stood open, revealing bare hangers where her clothes had been. My eyes immediately went to the foot of the bed. The antique chest was still there, closed and seemingly undisturbed. I rushed to it, hands trembling as I turned the small key I'd left in the lock. The heavy lid creaked as I lifted it, revealing exactly what I feared: absolute emptiness, save for a lingering trace of Amanda's favorite perfume. I ran through the house, calling her name with increasing desperation, though I already knew she was gone. In the kitchen, I found a handwritten note on the counter, held in place by a coffee mug, Margaret's favorite, a handmade pottery piece from our 20th anniversary trip to Santa Fe. "Dad, thanks for making this so easy. I've been waiting years for my share of the family fortune, and you finally delivered it right to my room. I can live my dream now, the one you and Mom never supported. Don't try to find me. By the time you read this, I'll be somewhere you can't reach. Maybe someday you'll understand that I deserve this money as much as you do. It was going to be wasted on an empty house anyway. Mom's gone, and that dream died with her. It's time for new dreams now. Amanda." I read the note 3 times, the words blurring through my tears. The calculated cruelty of it, using Margaret's memory as a weapon, dismissing our dream home as a waste, cut deeper than the theft itself. I sank into a kitchen chair, my mind struggling to process what had happened. $18 million. Gone. My daughter. Gone. The house that represented my final promise to Margaret, now in jeopardy. The magnitude of the betrayal was overwhelming. For hours, I sat immobilized by conflicting emotions. Rage burned through me, then soul-crushing disappointment, then an almost unbearable grief. Not just for the money, but for the final death of any relationship with my only child. Through all Amanda's previous failures and manipulations, I'd maintained a stubborn hope that someday she would change, that we could rebuild what had been broken. Now that hope lay shattered on the kitchen floor alongside my heart. I picked up my phone a dozen times to call her, knowing it was futile. Each call went straight to voicemail, her cheerful recording now seeming like another layer of mockery. I checked her social media accounts only to find they had all been deactivated or made private. The painful question of whether to report my own daughter to the police consumed me. The amount she'd stolen made it grand theft, a felony that could send her to prison for years. Despite everything, could I really be the one to put my own child behind bars? What would Margaret say if she were here? Margaret had always been Amanda's fiercest defender, finding excuses for her behavior when I saw only irresponsibility. "She has your drive and my creativity," Margaret would say. "She just needs to find the right outlet." Would she have forgiven even this ultimate betrayal? As the shock began to wear off, more practical concerns surfaced. The meeting with Harrington, I should call and postpone. The bank, should I inform them? The money was legally withdrawn. They had no responsibility. The impossibility of explaining to anyone what had happened without looking like a fool weighed heavily on me. What kind of father doesn't know his daughter well enough to see this coming? What kind of businessman leaves $18 million in an antique chest? The questions I imagined others asking were the same ones now tormenting me. I wandered through the house, stopping at the framed photos of Amanda through the years. Her kindergarten graduation with a missing front tooth, middle school orchestra concerts with her violin, high school prom in a blue dress that matched her eyes, Margaret's eyes. Had there been signs all along that she was capable of this level of deception? Had my love for her blinded me, or had I simply seen what I wanted to see? In Margaret's home office, untouched since her death, I found myself looking at her favorite photo of Amanda, a candid shot from her 16th birthday. She was laughing, cake frosting on her nose, looking so innocent and genuinely happy. I picked up the frame, tracing my finger over my daughter's face. "What happened to that girl, Margaret?" I whispered to the empty room. "Where did we lose her?" The quiet house offered no answers, only echoes of my own questions. By late afternoon, I had moved from shock to a grim acceptance. I needed to act, to make decisions about what came next. Sitting in my own grief and anger would solve nothing. First, I would have to tell Harrington that the project would be delayed. The thought of making that call, explaining that the dream we'd been planning for months was now on hold indefinitely, made my chest tighten. It wasn't just a house. It was Margaret's legacy, my promise to her. Now that too had been stolen from me. Then came the hardest question. Do I report Amanda to the authorities? The magnitude of the theft meant this wasn't something I could simply absorb as another of her mistakes. This was a carefully planned criminal act against her own father. As darkness fell outside, I made my decision. I reached for the phone to make the call that would forever change whatever remained of our father-daughter relationship. It was time to contact the police. The two police officers who responded to my call tried to maintain professional expressions, but I could see the disbelief in their eyes as I explained the situation. $18 million in cash, stored in an antique chest, stolen by my own daughter. It sounded implausible even to my own ears. "Sir, we'll need documentation confirming this withdrawal," said Officer Ramirez, the older of the two, clearly skeptical. I provided the bank paperwork, the liability waivers, and contact information for Walter Griffith at Somerset Trust. They asked about Amanda, her full name, date of birth, known associates, possible destinations. I answered mechanically, each question driving home the reality that I was providing information to help apprehend my own child. "Do you have any recent photographs?" Officer Chen asked. I handed them a family photo taken at Christmas, just a few months before Margaret's diagnosis. Amanda stood between us, smiling broadly, her arm around her mother's shoulders. Looking at it now, I wondered if her smile had been genuine, or if she'd been calculating even then, waiting for an opportunity. After taking my statement, the officers explained the process. They would file a report, and given the amount involved, the case would likely be transferred to detectives who handle major theft crimes. They advised me to provide the same information to my homeowner's insurance, though they warned that most policies have limits for cash coverage that would fall far short of my loss. "Mr. Thompson," Officer Ramirez said as they prepared to leave, "I have to ask, is there any chance this is a misunderstanding? Family disputes over money can sometimes—" "She left a note," I interrupted, handing him Amanda's message. "There's no misunderstanding." After they left, I called Harrington and explained that there was an unexpected financial complication that would delay the project. He was understanding but couldn't hold my building slot indefinitely. If I couldn't secure funding within 30 days, he would have to move on to other clients. The following week passed in a blur of interviews and paperwork. Detectives from the Financial Crimes Unit took over the case, bringing a more sophisticated approach but the same underlying skepticism. They reviewed my home security footage, which showed Amanda entering her room the night before her disappearance but didn't capture her leaving with the money due to a camera blind spot in the hallway. Another detail she must have carefully noted. Representatives from the security company that had transported the money provided statements confirming the delivery to my home. Walter Griffith verified the withdrawal and provided bank surveillance footage of me leaving with the security team. Slowly, the improbable story was confirmed through documentation, though it did nothing to recover the money or locate Amanda. With the police investigation moving too slowly for my comfort, I hired Jackson Miles, a private investigator specializing in financial fraud and missing persons cases. Miles was a former FBI agent with a reputation for discretion and results. "Most people who steal this kind of money have a plan," Miles explained during our first meeting. "They don't just take it and figure things out afterward. Your daughter has likely been preparing for this for some time." His initial findings confirmed this assessment. Amanda had been researching countries without extradition treaties with the United States for months. Her internet search history, which Miles obtained through methods he declined to specify, showed multiple queries about banking in Switzerland, Singapore, and the Cayman Islands. Phone records revealed calls to international numbers in the weeks leading up to the theft. Credit card statements showed purchases of new luggage, travel clothing, and several high-end electronics, all bought online and shipped to a friend's address, not mine or her apartment. Most damning was the discovery that Amanda had let her apartment lease expire at the end of the previous month without mentioning it to me. She had been staying at my house, not out of a desire to reconnect, but because she had already begun the process of disappearing. "She's been planning this since she learned about the house project," Miles concluded, "maybe even earlier. The reconciliation, the sudden interest in interior design, it was all part of gaining access and information. Each new revelation was a fresh wound. Not only had she stolen the money, but every moment of our apparent reconciliation had been calculated deception. Those late-night conversations about Margaret, the shared memories, the tears, all performance. As the investigation continued, I found myself unable to sleep. Night after night, I sat in my study reviewing security footage, financial documents, old emails, anything that might provide a clue to Amanda's whereabouts or what I had missed. The logical part of my brain knew this was detective work best left to professionals, but I couldn't stop the compulsive search for answers. It was during one of these sleepless nights, around 3 in the morning, that I noticed something odd in the security footage from my study. The camera showed me entering alone after the security team left, carrying one of the cases. I remembered transferring money from the cases to Amanda's chest, but something about the timing seemed wrong. I checked the timestamp, 4:15 p.m., the day before Amanda disappeared. According to my recollection and my calendar, I should have been on a conference call with Thomas Reed at that time, discussing final adjustments to the house plans. I pulled up my phone records, confirming the 45-minute call starting at 4 p.m. I couldn't have been in two places at once. Playing the footage again at a slower speed, I noticed subtle differences in the way the figure moved compared to my usual gait. The person was wearing clothes identical to mine from earlier that day, but their posture was slightly different. With growing suspicion, I reviewed footage from multiple cameras, tracking my movements throughout the house that day. There was a 20-minute gap where I disappeared from all camera views, supposedly in the bathroom, a space without surveillance for obvious privacy reasons. When I reappeared, it was with that subtle difference in movement. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Amanda had used that window to access my study wearing clothes similar to mine, possibly taken from my laundry. She had created a false narrative in the security footage, making it appear that I had moved all the money to her room, when in fact, I rushed to my study, heart pounding. Behind a bookcase lay a hidden panel leading to a small safe room I'd had installed after a break-in at a neighbor's house years ago. Few people knew of its existence: Margaret, myself, and the security company that installed it. I hadn't mentioned it to Amanda, but she must have discovered it somehow. The panel was locked, just as I had left it. With trembling fingers, I entered the combination and swung open the heavy door. There, stacked neatly on metal shelving, were 8 reinforced security cases, exactly like those delivered by the security team. I opened the first case, expecting emptiness, preparing for confirmation that Amanda had found my true hiding place. Instead, I found neatly bundled $100 bills, crisp and untouched. I opened another case, then another, all full. Disbelieving, I did a rough count of one bundle. The money was all there, every dollar of the 18 million. But if the money was here, what had Amanda taken from the chest? The answer came in a flash of memory. After Margaret's death, I'd become increasingly security conscious, perhaps even paranoid. For the house project, I'd prepared a contingency, a decoy package containing stacks of paper cut to the size of bills, with only real currency on the top and bottom of each stack. Just enough authentic money to pass a cursory inspection. I hadn't consciously decided to use the decoy that day. When the security team arrived with the actual cash, I had them place it directly in my safe room. But the decoy remained in my study closet, and in a moment of either intuition or remarkable luck, I had placed it in Amanda's chest instead of the real money. What Amanda had stolen wasn't $18 million. It was worthless paper with perhaps $20,000 in real bills covering the stacks, and I had no idea she had taken a decoy. A strange emotion washed over me, relief mixed with an unexpected sense of vindication. All those years of suspecting Amanda's motives, of trying to set boundaries Margaret thought too harsh. Perhaps my instincts about our daughter had been right all along. Then came a realization even more stunning than the first. Within the decoy package, hidden between the stacks of cut paper, was a small GPS tracking device, another security measure I'd implemented for the transport of the real money. If the device was still active, if Amanda hadn't discovered and disabled it, I might be able to find exactly where my daughter had gone with her worthless treasure. The discovery that the real money remained secure while Amanda had fled with worthless paper gave me a complex mix of emotions. Relief, certainly. My financial future, and Margaret's dream house weren't destroyed, but also a deep sadness that my relationship with my daughter had deteriorated to the point where such deception was necessary, even if unintentional. I immediately contacted Miles to share my discovery, strategically omitting the existence of the safe room in my initial explanation. Some habits of caution are hard to break. "Let me get this straight," Miles said, his professional demeanor slipping for a moment. "She stole fake money? With a tracker in it?" "Not exactly fake," I clarified. "There are some real bills mixed in, enough to spend for a while before discovering the truth. And yes, there's a GPS tracker in the package." Miles let out a low whistle. "Well, that changes things. Can you access the tracker data?" I could, through an app on my phone connected to the security company's monitoring system. Within minutes, we had Amanda's location, the Royal Beachfront Resort in Bali, Indonesia. "Makes sense," Miles noted. "Beautiful place, no extradition treaty with the US, and a growing expat community. She probably figures she can disappear into luxury there." The irony wasn't lost on me. Amanda had chosen almost exactly the kind of destination Margaret and I had discussed for retirement before her illness changed everything. In her own way, my daughter was still following her mother's dreams, just without earning them. With the immediate crisis resolved, the money was safe, Amanda's location known, I faced a decision about what to do next. The logical move would be to inform the police, update the theft report to reflect the actual amount taken, 20,000 rather than 18 million, and let legal consequences take their course. But something held me back. The thought of Amanda, thousands of miles from home, discovering that her big score was worthless paper, troubled me deeply. Not because I felt she deserved the money, she absolutely didn't, but because I worried about what a cornered, desperate Amanda might do. Throughout her life, her response to failure had been to find someone to blame and someone to rescue her. With no one to fulfill either role in a foreign country, with her planned financial cushion revealed as worthless, what would she do? After careful consideration, I decided on a direct approach. I would go to Bali myself. I would confront Amanda, reveal the truth about the money, and offer her a choice: face legal consequences or accept help on my terms for the last time. The 14-hour flight gave me plenty of time to reflect on where things had gone wrong. Had Margaret and I created this situation through overindulgence? Had my emotional distance after Margaret's death pushed Amanda toward this desperate act? Or was this simply who Amanda had always been, regardless of our parenting? Someone who took the easy path, whatever the cost to others. By the time the plane touched down in Denpasar, I had made peace with my decision. This would be my final attempt to help Amanda grow into the person Margaret had always believed she could be. If she rejected it, I would have to accept that our relationship was truly beyond repair. The Royal Beachfront Resort was exactly the kind of place I'd expect Amanda to choose. Exclusive, extravagant, with private villas overlooking the Indian Ocean. I checked in under a false name Miles had arranged, then used the tracker app to pinpoint Amanda's location within the sprawling property. For 3 days, I observed from a distance. Amanda had secured one of the premium villas, complete with a private infinity pool and personal butler service. She spent her days lounging by the pool, shopping in the resort's luxury boutiques, and dining at its 5-star restaurants. From all appearances, she was living her dream. I watched her laughing with the bartenders, making friends with other wealthy guests, completely carefree. There was no sign of remorse, no hint that she ever thought about what she had done to her father or the promise I'd made to her mother. She had simply taken what she wanted and moved on, as she had done throughout her life. On the 4th day, I decided it was time. I arranged to be seated at an adjacent table during her usual breakfast time on her villa's private terrace. Her shock when she saw me was almost worth the entire trip. "Dad," she gasped, dropping her fork with a clatter. How are you here?" I smiled calmly, taking a sip of my coffee. "It's beautiful here. I can see why you chose it." Her eyes darted around as if looking for escape routes. "How did you find me?" "You took something that belonged to me," I replied simply. "Did you think I wouldn't come looking for it?" A flash of defiance crossed her face. "That money was as much mine as yours. Mom would have wanted me to have it." The mention of Margaret nearly broke my composure. Don't you dare use your mother to justify theft. She believed in you until her last breath. This would have broken her heart. Amanda's eyes filled with tears. But I'd seen this performance before. You never supported my dreams. All those years, I just needed you to believe in me like she did. Your dreams. I kept my voice low, though anger surged within me. You've never stuck with anything long enough to call it a dream. But that's not why I'm here. I reached into my jacket pocket and removed a single stack of cut paper with a real $100 bill on top. Her eyes widened as understanding slowly dawned. What is this? She whispered, though I could tell she already knew. Take a closer look at your millions, I suggested. Underneath those top bills, the color drained from her face. Without another word, she rushed inside her villa. I followed calmly, watching as she pulled a designer suitcase from under the bed and frantically opened it. She pulled out stack after stack, ripping off the top bills to reveal the worthless paper beneath. This isn't possible, she breathed, her voice barely audible. I checked some of the stacks. They were real. The top and bottom bills of each stack are real, I explained. About $20,000 total. Enough to get you this far, to let you believe you'd succeeded. The rest is worthless. Amanda sank to the floor among the scattered paper, genuine tears now flowing. I've spent almost half of it already on this place. On clothes. On everything. For the first time since discovering her betrayal, I felt a flicker of sympathy. Not for her predicament. That was entirely self-created, but for the person she had become, someone so disconnected from reality, so entitled, that she believed stealing from her father was justified. You have two choices, I said, sitting on the edge of the bed. Option 1. I call the police here and in the States. The amount you actually stole is still grand theft. You'll face extradition eventually. Criminal charges, probably prison time. She looked up, mascara streaming down her face. And option 2, you come home. You get professional help, therapy, financial counseling, addiction treatment if necessary. You work a real job, pay your own bills, and start building a life based on something other than taking from others. Why would you offer me that? She asked, suspicion mixing with the desperation in her voice. After what I did, I thought of Margaret, of the promise I'd made to her about building the house. Somehow, I felt she would want me to make one more promise, to not give up entirely on our daughter, however undeserving she seemed, because despite everything, you're still my daughter, and your mother would want me to offer you one last chance to become the person she always believed you could be. Amanda was silent for a long moment, considering my words. The money's really gone? All of it? The real money was never in that chest, I confirmed. It's safe, and it's going to build your mother's dream house, just as I promised her. Something shifted in her expression. A recognition, perhaps, that her lifelong pattern of manipulation and entitlement had finally reached its limit, or maybe just the pragmatic acceptance that she had no better options. What would this help entail exactly? She asked cautiously. As I outlined my non-negotiable terms for assistance, I felt no joy in her predicament, no satisfaction in having outsmarted her. Instead, I felt something I hadn't expected, hope. Not the naive hope that Margaret had maintained despite all evidence, but a clearer-eyed version. Hope that hitting this bottom might finally push Amanda toward genuine change. Hope that someday we might build, if not the relationship we should have had, at least one based on truth. Whether that hope was justified remained to be seen. But as we sat among the scattered fake bills in that luxury villa, I knew one thing with certainty. Margaret's dream would be fulfilled. The house would be built. And that, at least, was a promise I could keep. 1 year has passed since I found Amanda in that Bali resort villa. The confrontation marked a turning point, though not an instant transformation. Real change, I've learned, comes slowly, with setbacks and small victories along the way. After our confrontation, Amanda initially tested my resolve, suggesting compromises to my conditions and attempting to negotiate more favorable terms. When she realized I wouldn't budge, she reluctantly agreed to return home and accept help under my guidelines. The early days were challenging. Amanda went through withdrawal-like symptoms not from substances, but from the lifestyle she'd grown accustomed to. constant validation, unlimited spending, and freedom without responsibility. The financial counselor I'd arranged described her as having affluenza, a pathological relationship with money and privilege that had warped her understanding of consequences. I established clear boundaries from the beginning. She would live in a modest apartment I owned, but would pay reduced rent through legitimate work. She would attend therapy twice weekly. Any financial assistance would come as payment for actual work on the house project, evaluated by professionals, not by me. And perhaps most importantly, there would be consequences for dishonesty. No more endless second chances. For the first month, Amanda seemed to be simply going through the motions. Her therapy sessions, according to the therapist's general updates, were primarily spent justifying her actions and placing blame elsewhere. She took a job at a local coffee shop, which she quit after 2 weeks, claiming the manager was out to get her. The old patterns reasserted themselves, as I had expected they might. The turning point came unexpectedly. Amanda's therapist suggested she write a letter to Margaret, not to send, obviously, but to express the complicated feelings she had never properly addressed after her mother's death. Amanda resisted initially, but eventually complied. She never showed me the letter, but the process of writing it triggered something genuine. After that, her engagement in therapy deepened. She found another job, this time at a small interior design shop, and managed to keep it. Small steps, but significant ones. Meanwhile, construction on the main house proceeded as planned. Harrington and his team broke ground in late spring, and by fall, the basic structure was taking shape. I visited the site weekly, watching Margaret's vision slowly materialize against the backdrop of the Atlantic Ocean. During one such visit, about 6 months after Bali, I received an unexpected call from Amanda. She asked if she could see the house, not as an interior design consultant, just as a daughter trying to understand what had been so important to her parents. I agreed with caution. We met at the construction site on a crisp October afternoon. The main structure was complete, windows installed, but the interior remained unfinished. Amanda walked through the spaces silently, running her hand along raw beams and unfinished walls. In the master bedroom, with its panoramic ocean view, the spot where Margaret had imagined watching sunrises, Amanda stopped and turned to me with tears in her eyes. "I get it now," she said quietly. "This wasn't just about a house. This was about keeping a promise. Something shifted between us that day. Not forgiveness, exactly. The betrayal had cut too deep for simple forgiveness, but perhaps the beginning of understanding." Amanda asked if she could contribute something to the house, something small but meaningful. I suggested she might design a stained glass panel for the kitchen window, incorporating elements that reminded her of her mother. She threw herself into the project with an enthusiasm and commitment I hadn't seen from her since childhood. She researched techniques, consulted with artisans, created countless drafts. The final design, a pattern of morning glories, Margaret's favorite flower, climbing a trellis with the ocean beyond, captured something essential about Margaret's spirit. It now hangs in the kitchen window, casting blue-purple shadows across the counter on sunny mornings. As for the $18 million, I ultimately decided against giving Amanda direct access to any significant portion of my estate. Instead, I established a trust that would provide modest support if certain conditions were met: continued therapy, legitimate employment, demonstrated financial responsibility, not as punishment, but as protection, both for her and for the resources I'd worked a lifetime to build. "You're setting me up to fail," she accused when I first outlined the trust conditions. "No," I corrected her. "I'm setting you up to earn what you receive." She didn't see it then, but I think she's beginning to understand now. There's a dignity in earning your way that no amount of easy money can provide. Margaret knew this but couldn't bring herself to apply that wisdom to our daughter. Perhaps her greatest blind spot was her unwillingness to let Amanda struggle enough to grow. The house was completed this spring, exactly 2 years after Margaret's passing. It stands just as she envisioned, windows catching the first light of dawn, spaces that flow naturally from one to another, the observatory tower reaching toward the stars we both loved to watch. Adjacent to the main house, I added a small guest cottage, a potential space for Amanda someday. if our healing continues. On the anniversary of Margaret's death, I fulfilled my final promise to her. With Amanda present, I scattered some of Margaret's ashes along the shoreline below the house. We stood together in silence afterward, watching the tide carry the ashes out toward the horizon. "Do you think she would be proud of me now?" Amanda asked suddenly. "Your mother was always proud of you," I replied honestly. "But I think she would be especially proud of who you're working to become." It was the truth. Margaret had seen potential in Amanda that my more pragmatic nature often missed. Perhaps we had both been partially right. Margaret in believing in Amanda's capacity for growth, me in recognizing that growth requires challenge and consequence. The journey with Amanda continues, with progress and occasional setbacks. She recently completed a legitimate interior design certification and has started taking on small clients. She still attends therapy, though now monthly rather than weekly. Our relationship remains cautious but is slowly rebuilding on a foundation of greater honesty. As for me, I've learned that trust is not something freely given, but earned through consistent actions over time. I've learned that love sometimes requires allowing natural consequences rather than rushing to rescue. And perhaps most importantly, I've learned that it's never too late to honor promises, whether to a spouse of 40 years or to a daughter who lost her way. The money that Amanda tried to steal sits in secure investments now, funding not just the house, but charitable foundations focusing on grief counseling and addiction treatment, issues that have touched our family deeply. In a way, Margaret's legacy extends far beyond the physical structure of our dream home. Have I forgiven Amanda completely? That's a complex question. I've forgiven her enough to offer another chance, to remain in her life, to hope for her continued growth. The complete restoration of trust may take years more, or it may never fully return, but we're both learning to accept that imperfect relationship as valuable nonetheless. What would you do if someone you loved betrayed you so deeply? Would you offer another chance or walk away permanently? I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments. And if you found something meaningful in our story, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that even the deepest betrayals can sometimes lead to unexpected growth. Thank you for listening. And remember, sometimes the most valuable things we build aren't made of wood and stone, but of forgiveness, boundaries, and second chances offered wisely.